GM everyone. Welcome back to the Solana Weekly Wrap-Up, where we chat through Solana's biggest stories straight from the SolanaFloor newsroom. I'm, of course, joined by our senior journalist, Finn, and we're going to break down what's really moving the ecosystem, what's just noise, and most importantly, what's actually worth your attention. Finn, GM, sir, how are we doing?
Yeah, very good. Thanks, Jack. GM to you as well. How are you feeling about this week?
I'm a bit better than last week, if I'm honest. I feel that the tides of sentiment are somewhat turning. Last week was abhorrent. Crypto Twitter was in shambles, but there's a whole host of bullish news coming out this week, including some juicy airdrop updates as well. So things seem to be on the mend, maybe with the exception of stats, which I know you feel very strongly about. We're going to get to that shortly. But, reading through your banger of a newsletter, I personally got the impression that we're sort of at the mercy of the White House for good news, unfortunately. That's not always great. So before we get to DATS, before we get to the White House, let's unpack what I think is the most exciting piece of news coming out of the Solana ecosystem this week, the Seeker airdrop tracker.
Yeah, absolutely. So maybe not this week per se, but a few weeks ago, Seeker started activity tracking on the phone, which has been a really, really great way to make sure people can, ensure they're using the Seeker as it should be used. So you're trying to max out your new things, your in the store, your dApp usage, and of course, racking up as much on-chain activity as you can. So if you want to hop into the newsletter or read the article that we've just posted on the SolanaFloor site, you can get a good idea of how to best maximize your Seeker use. Now, for me personally, I think the on-chain section is probably the most important part. And I think it's really important in the sense not to try and spam as many transactions as you can. You want to be discerning, you want to be methodical, and you want to be really emphasizing valuable activity. So whether that's doing swaps through the Seeker Vault wallet, whether that's staking to the Seeker validator, there's a lot of ways to actually rack up that score. Jack, what are you doing to rack things up?
Well, I think, as you said, a really good piece of advice is to track what's actually being registered, right? But I found that the first circle and the third circle seem to be a lot easier to fill. So that's downloading new apps, connecting your wallet, just getting some daily on-chain activity. Staking, as you mentioned, to the Seeker validator is by far the best option. Now, you can swap between stables. In my experience, that gets registered as at least a transaction, but you're probably better off for, variety, just having a few, I don't know, meme coin swaps in there as well. You're probably going to be doing swaps anyway. You might as well be farming the SKR points in the meantime. But again, every single day, in my experience at least, if you're not in the dApp store, browsing, reviewing some of the dApps, rating them, then that middle circle is not going to fill. Even if you spend 2 hours on a Sunday, let's say you missed the Wednesday or a Thursday, it's not going to work. So that's my main pro tip for anyone farming the SKR airdrop. Be in the dApp store at least daily, do your swaps, and you should be good to go.
The thing that actually ramped it up for me is that over the last kind of week or so, I've just been doing some heavier swaps with the larger size, and that's helped me get up to level 4 on the tracker. So that's my advice. That's the alpha. You can also use OR. Like OR has gone crazy over the last week, and that's a really fun way to just get your transactions up while also contributing to Solana's native store value, whether you believe in it or not. But it's a fun thing to be involved in, nonetheless.
Absolutely, I'm very, very optimistic about this. Now, bullish news continues, Finn, but this time, the momentum's coming from Washington D.C. Because the White House is about to reopen. There's a $2,000 COVID-style stimmy check discussion as well. But people are actually wondering, I think, if this is going to have sort of a lasting impact going in towards the end of 2025. What do you think?
I think it's ultimately good news. Markets went up when the government went into shutdown, ironically, and it's looking like we're hopefully going to go up out of the shutdown. I think the most important thing is that the government coming back and the lights flipping back on in the White House means that we should get the rest of the Solana ETFs coming through. So there's about 6 or 7 of those waiting in the wings, including ones from Franklin Templeton and Fidelity, which hopefully would see larger inflows than some of the ETFs we've seen already. Polymarket odds are saying that the White House is going to reopen either today or before Friday. We've got about like a 96% chance of that happening. So people are very optimistic. And something that is fascinating, if you want to scroll down here on the article, is that Bitcoin has historically performed extremely well coming out of the government shutdown. So in the last government shutdown, I think 2018, 2019, we got a nice 300% gain when that closed down. And while obviously it's a different world, it's a different market, Bitcoin's not going to do that this time. I think there's a lot of optimism around what could come next.
What about the ETFs then? I guess aside from the 2 that managed to sort of get through with some legal alchemy, there's a bunch of pending ETFs as well. Do we think overall government reopens, a bunch of these ETFs get approved, they start trading, overall net positive?
Yeah, absolutely. I think ETFs have already proven that ETF investors, they're buying the dip. These are long-term people and they want to play long-term games. So if we have another 7 Sol ETFs from asset managers like Fidelity and like Franklin Templeton, that's only going to be good news. I wouldn't say that Chair Atkins is going to get in and give them the approval stamp the day the government reopens, but I think we could expect all of these to go live on NYSE pretty much within the week, hopefully.
Fingers crossed. Well, I mean, the one thing about the last reopening, obviously, we mentioned the COVID stimmy checks. I mean, crypto was in a very different place back then compared to where it is now. There was a very combative sort of SEC regime, and people were just sort of looking for the most degenerate way to spend their $2,000 stimmy checks back then. Now, I'm hopeful, I'm optimistic that we'll see some of that capital flowing into crypto, but let's see if that really has sort of an impact towards the end of the year. And that brings me to OR, which people have been, for better or worse, switching their attention over to. You wrote a story covering OR miners this week, and it seems a bunch of the Solana manlets have sort of shifted over to OR. But I get the sense that there's a bit of uncertainty there as to how the system actually works. It seems like it's sort of gambling. But then, as somebody who's very, very salty, as somebody who's sidelined, my understanding of it is, my analysis is that holding the underlying asset would have been your best bet over the last sort of couple of months while the price was pumping, rather than trying to get in and game the system. I feel that quite a few people have realized the hard way that it's essentially just a new form of gambling, right? But then again, I'm just salty. I'm just sidelined. Finn, what do you think?
I think it's a mix of both, right? I think obviously there is a lot of gambling involved, but there's also a lot of very strategic EV playing with the economics of it. What I think is most important to mention is that OR's revenue has been absolutely parabolic. Just around last week, it was doing 200, 300K a day. It topped at about $100 million per day, I think on Monday. So that shows that, there is quite strong demand for a store of value on Solana. And, there's something that is hopefully net deflationary at least, and can kind of, I guess create a proof of work based coin for the Solana ecosystem. I'm really happy with how it's been picked up, in the sense that it shows people want it. The economics are quite strong, and I think the most important thing is that the net inflations are actually staying negative. So while there was a big sell-off and it went from $650 down to, I think it's around 200 right now, the emissions have stayed pretty stable. So hopefully that continues, and yeah, we'll see where it goes next. A lot of teams are integrating into their apps now. We're seeing photo finishes looking at including some OR rewards. So yeah, really, really keen to see what happens next for OR. I think we're in a distribution phase. I think it probably kind of settles down for now, and it shows its true value over time.
When you say integration, is this one of these sort of crypto industry, we're launching a partnership style announcements, or are people actually looking to integrate what OR is doing? Or is it all smoke and mirrors?
No, I don't think it's all smoke and mirrors. I think a lot of builders on the ecosystem are really keen to integrate it into their apps however possible. So we've seen photo finishes using it for some race rewards. I think a guy NF Tim, who runs the refineor.com site, which is really helpful for any OR miners looking to make sure they're getting at least some stable analytics. He's saying that a lot of people have reached out to him to try and get integration and make contacts with Hard Hat Chat and the team. So yeah, optimistic for all long term.
Okay, well, I have a sneaky suspicion, regardless of the price action, regardless of what the sort of gambling element is, that we haven't heard the end of OR. We're probably going to be discussing it for the coming weeks because, among other things, maybe it's not Binance itself, but there's a bunch of BNB folk that have launched their own version of it. It seems like a bit of a spin-off. Smash or pass, Finn?
Look, it's imitation is flattery. We saw it with a few weeks ago. Binance did a big meme run, and they started promoting all kinds of meme coins through their account. This time around, Binance is, or not Binance, but some Binance players are forking OR to run it over on the BNB chain. So yeah, imitation is flattery. People are showing that the model works, and they want to build these kind of apps on other chains as well. So yeah, we keen to see how that plays out for them.
Let's see where that goes. Now back to the Solana ecosystem. Hilo, you wrote a story about this a while ago, and our data analyst Aria has been covering this as well. I find it quite interesting. Stablecoin adoption generally has been talk of the town for a long, long time. It's probably the killer use case of the industry, as people are calling it this year. But in Solana, we've been discussing this $450 million per year value leak from stablecoins, right? USDT and USDC obviously have a dominance, bit of a chokehold over the industry. And in recent months, we've been talking about Solana native stablecoins. That was a whole discussion. You've got Keel coming in and making moves. So there's some newcomers to this as well, into this arena. So what's up with Hilo?
So first of all, I really like Hilo. I think Hilo is a great app. They're really bringing a decentralized stablecoin, the likes of which we haven't seen before, with a model that is quite creative. So at the moment, obviously, we are seeing a lot of decentralized stablecoins pop up across Solana, and Hilo has reached 100 million TVL. They've just crossed 1 million in revenue since they launched, just in about June or July, I believe. So it's great to see it working. It's great to see people picking it up. The trend is basically that Hilo's assets are going up in terms of TVL. You know, they have more mints every day. And what really stood out for me is that when we had that horrible flash crash on 10/10 on that Black Friday, there was no DPIG, there was no bad debt. Hilo held up really well. So yeah, excited about Hilo. They've done really well. They're shipping, they're delivering, and it's just great to see stablecoins being retained by the Solana ecosystem and getting more widely integrated with other Solana-based apps. So awesome job, Hilo. Well done.
These charts look overwhelmingly bullish. You mentioned resilience in the face of some of the sort of more negative events like 10/10. I guess the real question going back to this whole stablecoin value leak is Circle and Tether's stablecoins have proven themselves to be reliable. They're useful. People use them. People trust the names now. How quickly are we realistically going to see a shift away from the dependence on these two stablecoins? We mentioned Keel there a second ago. You've got all these alternatives coming out. People like Lily were discussing like a sort of a white label stablecoin solution. Think 12 months out, 16, 18 months out. How quickly are we going to reduce the dependence on USDC and USDT?
I think it's a long-term game, right? I think there's very long-term time horizons with this. You only build trust by going through years and years of terrible market conditions, of black swan events, and things like that. So while Hilo is doing really well, and HiUSD has performed extremely admirably in recent times, it takes years before people really start having full trust in these systems. And even hearing the word algorithmic stablecoin makes me raise my eyebrows. So, well, as I said, huge fan of HiUSD, but I think it needs a bit more time before people start really deploying large size into it.
All right,
really love the trajectory they're on. Really love the trajectory they're on.
Yeah, we'll definitely be talking about this. I mean, up and to the right charts are obviously going to be grabbing attentions. But next up, we have another sort of story that I thought should have been a banger in the Solana ecosystem. You've got Robinhood and Jupiter, which are both sort of giants in their own rights. So I was under the impression that an announcement like this, an integration between the two of them, would have been headlines, left, right, and center. So I guess the question here is: do you think it's the negative sentiment that we're seeing at the moment, the poor price action of the last couple of weeks, that sort of dampened some of the spice in this announcement, or am I missing something? Is it a nothing burger? What's going on here with Robinhood and Jupiter?
I think at face value, it's very exciting, right? Robinhood is one of the biggest financial apps in the world. Jupiter is obviously Solana's DeFi super app and does huge numbers across the board. I think while it's very exciting, obviously, that Robinhood has shoulder tapped Jupiter for this, we have to bear in mind that it's an integration for their Web3 wallet app. And I'm not sure how many people who use Robinhood use the Web3 wallet app, and I'm not sure how many people who use Robinhood also don't already have Phantom or Solflare or some other app like that for any of their on-chain activities. So headline is great, obviously really good for anyone who uses the Robinhood wallet app who isn't yet in the Solana DeFi scene. But I think there's not a huge market there for people to kind of jump in on that they're not already involved in, if that makes sense.
Interesting. So, I mean, I again find this overall super bullish for the industry, particularly when you consider the fact that ETFs are rolling out at the moment. The White House seems very optimistic about the crypto future. You've got banks now, right? SoFi offering direct access to BTC, ETH, to Sol, most importantly, best asset in the world. And all the aunts and uncles out there using all these TradFi applications can now finally just ape into the tokens and assets that we've been accumulating for a while. So, I mean, look, people gamble on Robinhood. It's no secret. I would expect some of that appetite for gambling and speculation and maybe buying assets that people haven't typically dabbled in before to sort of make its way into the Solana ecosystem. But do you reckon this is also like a 12-month, 18-month sort of trajectory? Or do you get the sense that maybe Vlad and Robinhood do some sort of big campaign buying this because of the Jupiter integration now? It's, as you mentioned, one of the biggest DeFi names in Solana, one of the most trusted brands. How fast do you think this might actually have a trickle-down effect for Solana?
I don't know if it's going to have a very big trickle-down effect, to be honest. Again, like I think it's a great collaboration. It's a great headline, but I think there's almost a dichotomy of the user base, right? If you're holding crypto on Robinhood, you're probably not going to be going into the app and swapping SPL tokens and trading meme coins and buying Solana project tokens at all. So I don't want to say it's a nothing burger, because that's unfair. It's obviously a great collaboration, but I think it's not going to have the impact that perhaps you might think if you first hear Robinhood Jupiter collaboration.
Interesting. All right. Now, speaking of impact, we have a story that I think is going to have a lot of impact. I know you feel very, very passionate about DATs. You and I have had some conversations in private. I've heard you, interviewing people from DATs. I know you're super passionate about this. We have the Soulmate validator launch. I think it's the first in the UAE. Correct me if I'm wrong here. But then this is happening against the backdrop of DATs not having a great time. So Finn, given that you're our sort of in-house DAT expert, I'm going to defer all judgment on this to you, Kind. So what's going on with Soulmate, and more importantly, what's going on with DATs overall?
So just to bring this full circle, the Solana DATs are effectively trying to recreate the Michael Saylor playbook of buying a whole bunch of assets, raising funds against their NAV, and buying more of these assets to create a capital formation flywheel. And essentially, it sounds like a Ponzi. Ponzi is a strong word to use, but it's a lot of borrowing money to buy more of the asset that makes you more valuable. So already, it's kind of structurally fragile. And while there's a lot of reasons that you can say, Solana-based DATs, they generate revenue through staking rewards and things like that, I think the market is showing that there's actually a lot of fragility in a lot of these vehicles. So this story specifically deals with Soulmate launching its validator. It's the first one in the UAE, so good for geographic distribution and things like that. But the biggest issue facing DATs at the moment is that with a tumbling Sol price, a lot of the MNAVs of these DATs is crumbling as well. So as long as a DAT's MNAV is below 1, they're going to have a really hard time to borrow more funds, issue more stocks, and rebuy Sol to kind of keep that flywheel spinning. Already, so Soulmate, these guys in particular, a few weeks ago they bought some discounted Sol off the Solana Foundation, and they were really stoked about that. I think they bought $50 million worth at a 15% discount to market price, and with the price action we've had, they've actually slipped below that threshold. So they're down on their discounted buy. The MNAV is getting crunched, and no one is really able to borrow more funds to buy more Sol to keep the wheel spinning. So what we're seeing now is from companies like Forward Industries and the Solana company is that they're making announcements that they're going to be rebuying stock. So whether that's a question of defending the stock price so that shareholders don't start getting pissed off and start kind of chasing them to sell their Sol, or whether that's an aspect of them trying to artificially inflate their MNAV so that they can start reborrowing is up to the question. So yeah, it's a lot of dangerous waters in DAT land. What do you think?
I mean, here's what annoys me about this, right? Or rather, makes me feel like we had this conversation already. People like yourselves and, even some of the commentators we interviewed, James Seyfarth a while ago, who said it all looks a little bit frothy. Like it's not out of the blue. I feel like we asked these questions months ago. What happens if you keep top blasting Sol? The price of Sol crashes due to macro concerns. Trump's obviously a very unpredictable president. Anything can happen. He can announce 100% tariffs on China overnight without seemingly any sort of word of caution in advance. Macro changes can impact the price of Sol. Obviously, Sol is very volatile. Your interview with Michael Antonio made that very clear. So why is it now that what people predicted as a potentially negative outcome of the price of Sol crashing is happening, and we don't seem particularly alarmed about it? That's what sort of concerns me. Should we be more concerned? You wrote a while ago about systemic risks that DATs pose to the Solana ecosystem, but I get the feeling this is sort of more generally a crypto phenomenon, right? Could this be the end of the bull run at some point? I don't know. I mean, it's a bunch of red flags for me. But what are your thoughts?
I think DATs that don't really have a systemic unraveling risk in the sense that leverage traders trading perps do. DATs predominantly don't have a forced selling arrangement. So the only way that they're going to be selling is if they actually give up on the model. So as long as all these DAT operators continue to believe in Sol, then there's not going to be massive sell-offs across the board. We have seen some of the much smaller ones like Torrent Capital recently exited their Sol position and have rebranded out of being a Sol DAT. So I guess the long and short of it is hopefully there's no kind of liquidation risk. There's no chance that it all falls apart. But essentially, as Sol price drops, these DATs, they lose their underlying value and they struggle to continue buying. So while Sol price itself probably doesn't get too deeply impacted by this unless they all pack up and leave and throw their toys out of the cot. The TradFi investors who buy the underlying stock of these DATs, who think that they're getting a leverage bet on Sol, probably getting a darker, deeper hit than what they would be if they just bought their Sol and staked it themselves.
Yeah, well, I think one thing that stops me from being exclusively bearish on DATs at the moment is, people like Kyle Samani coming out and saying we have, first of all, a very large line of credit to keep, buying the asset. And secondly, very large plans, grand designs, you might call them, to be aggressively acquiring and merging with other Solana DATs out there, even non-Solana DATs, and become the biggest DAT treasury, out there in the world. So I don't know. Long term, I'm optimistic. We probably go through a bit of a shakeout. There's probably a bit of a consolidation period, but I hope it doesn't, in the short term, cause a bit of an unraveling effect. That's sort of my field. Now, if you were to zoom out, Finn, you've been following this story for a while. Do you think, the trenches, people that are more on the retail side of life in Solana land, are they mainly bearish on DATs or bullish on DATs, or do you have a sense of what people feel?
I think people generally feel that the model has been proven to not be as successful as it was believed to have been, if that makes sense. People love to point at Michael Saylor's strategy and they go like, well, the chart is up and to the right, strategy is amazing. But what people tend to overlook when they talk about that is that Michael Saylor started doing this at the bottom, right? Like he was clipping into Bitcoin, it was 20K, 25K, and he's ridden that the whole way up. And a lot of these DATs have actually launched with Sol around like $190 to $200. So for them, it's kind of only been down only. And while that is alarming in a sense, we have to remember that also a lot of these guys, Rockaway, X, Galaxy, Multicoin, they've seen the ups and downs of Sol, so they know that it can go down 60, down 70%, and they'll have a plan in mind for that. And it would be foolish to assume that they haven't hedged themselves in some respect either. So while they are evidently down on their buys, they're probably making up for that somewhere else, and they're probably balancing books somewhere else. So it's probably not all as doomy and as gloomy as it could be perceived.
You're right. They've undoubtedly done a bunch of scenario planning and prepared for this months in advance. So it seems we're going to be covering DATs for the foreseeable future. But before we get towards the end of this and wrap up, my favorite part of your newsletter, which I love, it's your stat of the week and your tweet of the week. But we've just spoken about the 6th most important stories in Solana land. You also have this week some honorable mentions. So I feel like there's just too much to fit into a newsletter. Talk me through these honorable mentions.
Yes, so rapid round. SoFi becomes the first regulated US bank to allow customers to invest in Bitcoin, Ethereum, and Sol, and a few other ones. So your TradFi bros, your uncles and aunts, they're finally getting that exposure. The New York Stock Exchange is launching options on ETFs. So more ways to trade ETFs. We love that. Higher volume, more utility, everything good about that. Unruggable is launching a Solana native hardware wallet. We've got the Coliseum Cypherpunk Hackathon has released its directory. There's over 1,500 projects here to look at and sink your teeth into. So if you're looking for alpha, if you're looking for new ideas, if you're looking for some innovative new protocols, check that out. Temporal has unveiled Harmonic. This is going to be a Jito competitor, so we love to see that. Jito has done an incredible job for a very long time, but also great to see they have some pressure on them now. And the guys at Temporal are fantastic. They do a lot of great things. So if anyone is going to destabilize that, Temporal is the one to do it. Finally, ANZA has floated another governance proposal, SIMD, 0385, and we're looking at some new transaction formatting. So it's not an Alpenglow, it's not a 228 in terms of magnitude, but good to see that there's some more kind of dev stuff happening under the hood to make things a bit more efficient. So top stuff.
Progress. Now, I guess next week we'll have time for this, but there's been a reintroduction of the proposals to reduce emissions, right? Is it they're thinking about cutting it in half? Is that right?
That's an idea that's been floated around by Tolly. I'm not sure how accurate that is. Word on the street is that Mert has got a proposal in the works, so really keen to see what that is, and hopefully I can get that out as soon as possible because inflation is high, and we can bring it down. Then that's good for everyone, I think.
Absolutely. Now, another story that we've been keeping an eye on is Pablo was off at Africa Blockchain Festival. What can you tell me about this? What's the TLDR? What was going on there? Obviously, emerging markets and crypto adoption is something that's very near and dear to our hearts. We talk about it a lot. But this is the first time that one of our journalists was on the ground at one of these conferences. So what happened?
So first of all, shout out Pablo. Pablo was one of our journalists. He was down on the ground there in Rwanda, chatting to people all across out the African blockchain scene. Obviously, you and I went there, so we can't go into as much detail as he would be able to. But I asked him to summarize it into 3 key points. What Pablo has passed on is that stablecoins have found PMF in Africa. They've been really successful due to things like local currency collapse and local currency inflation. But a lot of African crypto leaders are saying, while this has been great, we also need to start looking at some more local fiat-based stablecoins for African nations, and that will reduce reliance on external ones. So curious to see how that plays out in the future to come. Another point he mentioned was that innovation needs regulatory clarity. So just as having a pro-crypto SEC in the US has opened a lot of doors for crypto companies there, a lot of African countries are really hoping that their local governments can become progressive crypto as well, and that will basically give them fertile ground to start innovating as rapidly as they can. Finally, the last thing he mentioned was that blockchain AI is obviously the biggest growth vertical coming in the next few years, and African crypto leaders are saying that they want to be as involved in that as they can to, again, not be reliant on what is happening elsewhere in the world. So well done, Pablo. Thank you so much for representing SolanaFloor down there, and can't wait to hear as much as I can about that next time we chat.
We got Pablo, absolutely. Hopefully we can be there on the ground for the next set of conferences as well. Finn, my favorite part of your newsletter is where you share the stat of the week and you share a tweet of the week. I think it really just captures sentiment and, whether it's bullish, whether it's bearish, really perfectly in 2 images. So talk me through the stat of the week, and then let's get to the tweet of the week.
So first of all, stat of the week, Ore has been crushing it. Revenue is flying through the roof. Yes, price is down, but actually revenue has stayed pretty solid around that. So if you're bullish long-term on having a Solana native store of value, Ore is shaping up like it's doing the best to provide that so far. Like that revenue curve is pretty parabolic.
Very steep, very, very steep. Again, as someone who's salty and sidelined, I'm not going to comment too much, but congratulations to anyone who caught that. And if you were told to buy it months ago and you did, you're a lot smarter of an investor than I am. So state of Solana in a tweet. We've got one from Seg. Bit of a banger. Talk me through this one.
Seg rolling out from the team at Jito. Regardless of Solana's price action, it's still the best place to build products and benefit from global liquidity and coordination. Seeing lots of grey bouncing on the timeline regarding year-to-date returns. While it's true the best engineers and talent I know still choose Solana for their products back-end infrastructure. If you can't understand this, I don't have time to explain it to you. Pretty self-explanatory. Solana is the best place to build apps today. Maybe price is down, that doesn't matter. It's still the most performant layer 1 blockchain available. So if you're looking at building a product, there's really nowhere better to be.
Absolutely. What a banger. Now, I think it's fair that we sort of end on a bullish note. And, we should remind everyone to check out the Seeker airdrop guide as well. We published a video yesterday. Go and check that out. Of course, there's a very comprehensive article that you wrote as well on SolanaFloor.com. Finally, I have to shamelessly plug this at this point, right? Because a lot of work has gone into this. We're going to be doing a live stream at Breakpoint in Abu Dhabi, and we're going to be chatting, obviously, to the biggest names in the industry. So be there or miss all the alpha. Now, you can tune in on X, you can tune in on YouTube. When you see the notifications come through for that, make sure you click the bell button so you get notified. It's going to be on December 11, 12, and 13th. Finn, I'm super excited. When actually is Breakpoint? How many days are left? Surely it's very soon.
We're winding down. I think we've got about 28, 29 days left to go. So that's going to go by in a flash, and we're going to be on the ground in Abu Dhabi within before we even know it, right? And it's going to be, I think it's probably going to be the biggest Breakpoint ever. So I'm absolutely fizzing for it.
I would imagine so, with the amount of institutional attention there as well. So we're going to have a banger lineup of guests there. I cannot wait. All right, that's the 6 biggest stories of the week, straight from the SolanaFloor newsroom. We will, of course, be back next week. And if you want Finn's full breakdowns and his spicy hot takes every week, then head to SolanaFloor.com. Subscribe to his newsletter. It is delicious, and you will learn a lot. Finn, see you next week.
Jack, thank you so much. Let's hash it out again.
Absolutely.